battered by waves, dried out by sun and wind, it's surprising how many plants and animals manage to live on a rocky shore. But there are refuges. Scattered over the beach, rock pools contain a fantastic variety of seashore life, whose underwater world is delicately balanced and easily destroyed. Unfortunately, the Victorians, with their great passion for natural history and collecting, weren't content just to look beneath the surface. The colourful array of underwater wildlife would have proved irresistible to Victorian naturalists, and 150 years ago, this rock pool would have been stripped bare in the search for specimens. But today, we're happy just to sit and watch and let life in a rock pool get on with the business of living. Looking into a rock pool like this, it's easy to understand the historic craze for natural history. They are, if you like, oceans in microcosm, a mini-sea with its own shores, deeps and shallows. But whereas there are no really extreme changes in the oceans themselves, the inhabitants of a rock pool have to withstand many different conditions. Twice a day, the tide sweeps in, refilling the pool with fresh sea water. And twice each day, the tide goes out, exposing the life of the pool to the heat of the sun and the chill of the night. All these swiftly changing conditions must be overcome by the rock pool's residents, who have to adapt to these intertidal hardships or die. But it's right at the top of the rocky shore that the extremes are greatest. All that can survive here are lichens, a mixture of fungi and algae which can cope with the harsh conditions. And as you walk down the shore again and it gets progressively wetter, there's a greater variety of life, all of it very carefully adapted for survival. There are plenty of hazards here, but the most obvious is the crashing waves. The limpet is superbly adapted in many ways to cope with such conditions. Its strong ribbed shell with the pyramid shape can withstand the most thunderous weight of water. The broad sucker-like foot clings tenaciously to the rock, enabling the limpet to trap enough water to prevent itself from drying out. The shockproof limpet can withstand the force of even the most violent wave, up to 6,000 pounds per square foot in winter gales. When they're covered by water, limpets graze the algae on the rocks, keeping close to their homes, made to measure indentations or scars in the rock that they excavate with their hard shells and the iron oxide tips on their tongues. Because it's the only place where they can cling on really tightly, they always return home when the tide turns. You can show this quite easily with small limpets by tipping some fresh seawater into the pool where they're grazing. They think the tide's coming in, and because that's when the big limpets feed, the little limpets dash for home to avoid being bulldozed off the rocks by the larger limpets. Sometimes they need a bit of persuading. The tide actually is coming in. Ah, there goes one. It may look as though it's only moving very slowly, but for a limpet, that's quite fast. It's much faster than when they're just grazing. It's really doing quite well. The terrain's quite rough for a small animal like a limpet. It might look as though there's just a few little bumps, but that must seem like Beecher's Brook to him. He's nearly home now. Just a matter of a centimetre or two. You can see those tentacles feeling the way all the way around the edge of his shell. As he comes to the scar, it'll turn itself round to make sure that it's in the right position. There he goes, starting to rotate, feeling his way carefully round into that scar. Ah, I think he thinks he's comfy now. Oh, no, changed its mind. Settle itself down again. There we are, perfect fit. The most interesting behaviour is shown by China limpets. Small ones groom the adults, grazing any algae which grow on their shells. The adults seem to find this irritating and try to dislodge them, and if a small limpet gets in the path of a larger one, it runs the risk of being pushed and shoved out of the way. China limpets are territorial and will aggressively defend their home scar against intruders. While they browse, limpets build up a chemical map of their area, never straying more than a metre from their scars. If they're moved out of their territory, they get totally lost. The scars from generations of limpets twisting themselves tight onto their home bases can be found all over the rocks, but they're most obvious in the pools. Limpets share their rocky pastures with other browsers, such as topshells and periwinkles, which also eat seaweed, rasping it away with their horny tongues. There are several different types of periwinkle found from top to bottom of the rocky shore. As well as feeding on the spawling stages of seaweeds, they eat other minute algae growing on the larger racks. Probably the most conspicuous is the flatwinkle, often bright yellow, but also found in other colours. Topshells aren't found as high up the beach as periwinkles, as they're not so well adapted to the drier conditions. Both topshells and periwinkles inadvertently damage limpet shells by grazing off the top of them. If you see a limpet looking like this, with the undershell showing right through, you can be fairly sure it's the horny tongue of a topshell or periwinkle, or even perhaps another limpet, which is to blame. Unlike limpets, periwinkles are not always able to stick to the rocks to protect themselves from waves, but their tough, tightly curled shells allow them to be tossed around in the stormiest weather without harm to the creature tucked up inside. When the tide goes out, periwinkles shelter in damp rock crevices or under seaweed. One of the hardiest of the intertidal creatures is the acorn barnacle, those cement-like incrustations of tiny pimples whose rough shells make it so painful to walk over the rocks in bare feet. Barnacles not only withstand the full force of the waves, but they're exposed to the air for long periods. Of all the animals on the rocky shore, they're the commonest, but most of the time they display about as much sign of life as a patch of concrete. Only when the tide covers them do the barnacles begin to stir, and their feathery feelers sift the water. They look like antennae, but they are in fact the barnacle's legs. The barnacle is a crustacean, not a mollusk as it was once thought, and uses its legs to comb the water for plankton. What the barnacles are actually doing is standing on their heads and kicking food into their mouths. tide goes out again, their internal plates snap shut, protecting them against drying out on a hot summer's day. Many of the barnacles will be empty cases, cleared out by predators. Just as on land there are grazers and flesh eaters, so too in the world of the rock pool. In many ways, a rock pool is no different from the African plains, an underwater Serengeti where hungry hunters roam. The commonest is the dog whelk, a carnivore which preys on mollusks and crustaceans, drilling through their shells with the hard points on the end of its hollow, rasping tongue, so that it can suck out their flesh. Dog whelks prey on most of the grazing marine snails, but they concentrate on two animals which can't get away: mussels, which provide a large amount of rich meat, and barnacles, which they attack by simply forcing open their internal plates. The forests and savannas of this seaside Serengeti are the seaweeds, providing food and shelter for many marine creatures. Seaweeds aren't really weeds at all. They're large algae especially adapted for life between the tides. Some species can withstand drying out far better than others, and so they tend to be found near the high tide mark where they're exposed to the air for long periods of time. Whereas others, which need to be almost permanently covered by water, are found further down the shore. And there's a distinct zonation between here and the cliffs. The zonation of seaweeds is easiest to see at low tide, when birds like the turnstone winkle out their prey from underneath the untidy tangles of storm-tossed seaweed. The seaweeds vary a great deal in colour, size and shape. Hardly surprising, since there are some 800 species around the British Isles. Most of the seaweeds are brown, interspersed with green and red varieties, their colours showing best in the pools, where you can sometimes find unusual species like Cystocera with its iridescent blue tips. Many of them can be eaten either by domestic animals or by man. One of the commonest, bladderwrack, is grazed on by pigs up in Scotland, and it's known there as pigweed. And down at the bottom of the pool, looking rather bleached at the moment, is some carrageen. That can be boiled up to extract gelatin for making blancmanges. And this little one, which is usually dark red in winter, is pepper dulse. And it certainly lives up to its name. Whatever their colour or taste, they all use sunlight to power the food-producing process of photosynthesis, a system which exerts a powerful influence on life in a rock pool. It's not just the plants which benefit from this series of chemical reactions. During the day, seaweeds release oxygen into the water as a byproduct of photosynthesis, so keeping alive the oxygen-dependent life in the pool. The animals contribute by releasing carbon dioxide, which is absorbed by the seaweeds as a vital link in the photosynthetic chain. Seaweeds don't have roots, but their holdfast anchor them as securely as any limpet to the rock surfaces. Their plant fronds help them withstand wave action, and this slippery covering of mucus is useful as well. It might send many an unwary naturalist sliding head over heels, but it cuts down the friction as the plants are washed to and fro over the rocks, and so helps prevent them being scraped to pieces. Beady eyes on movable stalks. The common prawn scavenges the pool for scraps of food. Only the last 3 pairs of legs are used for walking. The front 2 pairs have miniature nippers for picking up tasty morsels. If danger threatens, the prawn darts smartly into reverse, helped by a powerful flick of its broad fan tail. For swimming, prawns use the 5 pairs of paddles under their abdomen to propel them gently through the water. Shrimps, unlike prawns which cruise around the bottom of rock pools, spend most of the day buried in sand. They're very difficult to see because they can change colour to suit their background. Another animal which is quite difficult to see, but you occasionally find stranded in pools, is the little cuttle. It's a type of cuttlefish, and when you find a living one, it looks absolutely nothing like the white and rather smelly skeleton that you feed to budgies. When disturbed, the little cuttle is able to reshape its pigment cells and change colour, either in an aggressive display or camouflage. Not all the occupants of the pool move about in search of food like the little cuttle. Some sit tight at all states of the tide and wait for the food to come to them. Frequently found growing on the fronds of the larger seaweeds are hydroids, simple carnivorous animals which feed on plankton. They carry stinging cells on their tentacles which paralyze their prey. The common beadlet anemone gets its name from the blue spots or beadlets at the base of its tentacles. Covered in stinging cells, the tentacles catch and paralyze prey. The luckless meal is then wrapped in a deadly embrace and absorbed into the anemone's mouth. Some beadlet anemones display aggression when threatened and will fight off others that encroach on their territory. As well as the paralyzing cells on their tentacles, they have a collar of coloured mounds of tissue, also equipped with stinging cells. The tentacles catch prey, but the deadly collar is reserved for fighting. This anemone has found a novel way of life. It's attached itself to an old whelk shell in which a hermit crab has taken up residence. The anemone can hitch a ride to various feeding grounds, where it can either gather delicacies from the seabed or sweep up the leftovers of its host's meal. At the same time, it's probable that the crab gets some protection from the anemone's stinging cells. Also sharing the hermit crab's home is a ragworm, which literally snatches food from the crab's mouth. In return, the ragworm may be acting as a kind of housekeeper, keeping the inside of the shell clean. At least 20 species of small fish hide amongst weeds and pools lower down on rocky shores. Some you rarely see because they're so well camouflaged, and others move so fast they're little more than a blur. Several species of brightly coloured wrasse are often found in the deeper pools. Wrasse feed on small mollusks and crustaceans, crunching them up and swallowing them, shell and all. The best adapted of all fish to rock pool life is the blenny. Even though it's only about 12 centimetres long, its teeth and neck muscles are powerful enough to chisel barnacles off rocks. During the breeding season, the male undergoes a striking change and becomes very dark with white lips. Once the female has laid the eggs, he guards them ferociously, chasing off any intruders. The blenny is a real pioneer amongst fish. It lives on the very frontiers of endurance and is often left high and dry for several hours until the tide comes in again. It's subjected to bitter cold in winter and broiled in summer. On a rainy day, the rock pools become diluted, and on a hot, sunny day, the water evaporates, increasing the salinity of the pools to a degree which would kill many creatures. All this the blenny and the other inhabitants of the rock pools take in their stride. Each in its different way has managed to adapt to the seesaw life of high and low tides. Today, just as in Victorian times, rocks and rock pools are fascinating places to explore. But luckily, nowadays, the craze for collecting has died down, which is encouraging. After all, even though life in a rock pool can withstand pounding seas and hot sun, it's easily disturbed or even destroyed by meddling hands. With all the hazards that the plants and animals of rocky shores face, whether they're human or natural, it's incredible that there's such a variety of life on the rocks and in the pools between the tides.